Where is justice? What is mercy? Where's the sacred and the holy? In this world full of choices, where's the truth in all the voices? Give me an answer. Don't waste my time. Tell it to me straight. The truth is getting hard to find. I have objections to what I've learned. I have questions and concerns. Give me an answer.
You said he was a being.
Correct.
So there's absolutely no way that God would be able to transform himself for us to see him?
Well, yes, God became a man in Jesus Christ.
Right.
And people saw Christ. But no one has ever seen the Father. You can't see God.
But if there's a God that created us out of nothing, I would assume that God would be all-powerful. So a God that can create life out of nothing can't make himself into some kind of form that we can actually see here.
Yeah, he did that in Jesus.
What about now?
He has chosen not to do that now. He's by his Holy Spirit he reaches out, but
If
not
I
in the physical form.
If I summon God, if I say, God, please show yourself right now, and I will believe for the rest of my life. If I do that right now, what are the chances that he's going to do that for me?
Very
or
minimal.
anybody else here that has questions in religion that doesn't really know how to. This guy made a great point, and I think what he's saying is exactly what I believe too. I don't necessarily believe that there isn't a God. I don't know if there's a God or not, but I would need more proof based on the proof that we use on a regular basis to believe that there is God. So I would say right now, I would summon God. God, please show yourself.
Right.
And every one of these people in this crowd right now will become believers instantly. There won't be any more arguments, no more discussions about religion, no more discussions about whether God exists or not. Please show yourself right now.
What do you think of the guy whose girlfriend looks in his face and says, I really love you? And he says, really? Prove it, have sex with me. What do you think of that guy?
First of all, it's not the context of what I'm saying right now. It has nothing to do with what I'm saying. I'm just saying, okay?
That's baloney, sir. I'm hitting you straight up, and you know it.
When everything
You're
is
standing
said and
out
done,
here saying,
God, show up, please.
God, in order for
Make
me to
all of us
believe in
believe.
you,
Make
you have to
everybody
do
in this crowd
this.
believe right
And if
now.
you
Show
don't
up.
do it, I can't believe in you. And I asked you a very pointed question that you know applies exactly to the principle you're making.
How does a boyfriend asking a girlfriend to have sex to prove that he loves her have to do with God showing up right now and turning all of us into believers?
Because what you're saying is, in order for me to believe, you have to do this, which means you no longer can choose how to reveal yourself to me. I dictate how you are to reveal yourself to me, and if you don't do it, I don't believe you. That is exactly like the girl whose boyfriend says to me, you say that I love you? I don't believe it until you have sex with me. What he's doing is, he is not allowing that woman to reveal her love for him as she chooses. He is dictating how she is to communicate her love to him, and if she doesn't do it his way, he doesn't believe her.
How do human beings believe in anything? Well, if you don't mind me asking, what religion are you? I'm just curious.
I'm a follower of Jesus Christ.
Okay, so do you go by a specific denomination?
No.
Or just, okay. What were your parents? Were they
Seventh-day Adventist.
Same thing?
And Presbyterian. And interdenominational.
Okay.
And congregational.
Do you feel
mixed bag?
Do you feel that we'd be having this discussion today if your parents were not Presbyterian and Seventh-day Adventist?
Okay, now I'm going to ask you to please explain the thinking behind that question, and I want all of you to. It's a great question, but obviously you're making a point. So what's the point you're making? Articulate it. Come on.
You don't know.
No, that's not true. Come on. The point you're making is what? What's he making?
The point he's trying to make is you're a child, you're like a sponge, and you accept and take in whatever. So when, most people take on the religion that their parents are, because like if their parents go to church and they make them go to church, they will naturally end up believing it, because that's a age where you will accept, sort of, because that's the age when you're learning a lot of information, so you will accept.
People feel comfort.
Like if he's asking, would we even be discussing whether God exists if, say, your parents were atheists?
Good. And isn't he also hinting at a faith a belief that says you are simply the sum total of the influences of your environment. You are the result of your culture. Okay, do you believe that you are simply the result of your culture?
I believe that culture plays a huge part in it. Not the entire thing, but a huge part.
Okay, good. I agree. But there's more to you than the influences of your culture.
Agreed.
Because you come from an Adventist home and you're not an Adventist.
Agreed.
Right?
Right.
Okay, so I hope that you're not going to assume that I'm a Christian because Mom and Dad are Christians.
Oh, I won't assume it, but I'll say that there is a pretty good chance that we're having this discussion today because your parents are religious. There's a great chance. Do I know what the chance is? I don't know what the exact percentage of the chance is, but there's a great chance that we're having this discussion today because your parents are religious. I'm saying that people feel comfort.
Yeah, but why are we having this discussion in light of the fact that your parents were religious and now you're not?
Oh no, because like I said before, I fall into the category that he was explaining earlier. Like,
yeah, you have a free will.
Correct, right.
Right.
And I would love to believe like you. I would love to. But I'm not going to believe just because there's nothing else to live for. Or I'm not going to believe because it's something that my parents did. I'm saying that human beings have a tendency to feel comfort doing things that are tradition to them, things that they're used to. You know, people go to baseball games right now because their parents used to bring them to baseball games when they were young, and it makes them feel good. It comforts them. And so that's the vast majority of people that are religious do that because, well, okay, let me not say, I can't say the vast majority, but plenty of people do it because it's something that they're used to. So I would say that if the argument goes down that path, there's absolutely no way that we can prove anything. So the bottom line of whether we can prove whether there's a God or not, or what you're saying is true and what I'm saying is wrong, or what he's saying is wrong, whatever everybody else feels here, is for God to show up and show us that he's real. And this discussion will be completely over. Completely over.
Okay, I do not believe that God exists because Mommy and Daddy believe God exists.
Okay.
I believe God exists because the order and design of the cosmos points to an intelligent mind. I believe God exists because this universe has a beginning. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause. God is an uncaused cause. The best answer to the question, where does the universe come from? Thirdly, I believe God exists because the amount of DNA in a single cell, densely packed information, demands an intelligent mind.
Yeah.
Fourthly, I believe that God exists because of irreducible complexity. A single cell is too complex to just evolve.
How do you know that?
Because
How do you know
you
that?
can look at a single cell through a microscope.
That we're used to right now, right?
Pardon?
This is the reality that we're used to right now. How do we know how many attempts it took throughout the history of the universe to come to this point in time right now? It could have taken billions of attempts where one slight thing went wrong in a cell and that cell couldn't regenerate and create another cell and then become what we are right now.
Okay, but when I look into your face, sir, I see too much order and design to conclude accident, chance. When I look into your face, I see so much order and design that I have to believe there's got to be an intelligent mind behind you. Because in all of my experience in life, you never get order coming about as a result of chance, out of chaos. Instead, you get order and design as a result of an intelligent mind.
So I guess that's where, I mean, I can't really see this discussion going any further then, because what you're saying is a great point for you. I mean, you look at me, you look at anybody in this crowd, and you say, all right, I see your face, I see excellent design, I see excellent order, and to me, that's proof that there is a God. I look at your face and I say, all right, well, maybe there's a God, maybe a God made you, maybe you just evolved, I don't know. So there's no way that I can prove to you what I think, there's no way you can prove to me what you think, so
that's right.
How can we have, that's pretty much the end of the discussion. I mean,
sir, you can't prove anything in life. You base your life not on proof, but on evidence.
Right.
So you're right, I cannot prove God exists, but the evidence is that God exists.
In your mind, the evidence is that God exists.
No, I'm not saying to you guys, climb into my mind and figure out then that God exists. I'm saying you use your own mind. Ask yourself, is it more reasonable to believe the complexity of the human body, the human eye, the complexity of an earth that's life-sustaining instead of life-prohibiting? Like if we were a little closer to the sun, we'd all fry. If we were a little further from the sun, we'd all freeze. That's why Anthony Flew, the great atheist philosopher from Cambridge, a couple of years ago, said, I'm wrong. There's got to be a God because of the anthropic principle. You begin to study how life is balanced on a razor's edge. The laws of nature come together in such a way that we live in a life-sustaining earth, not a life-prohibiting earth.
How do you explain the fact that in 50 years or 100 years, I don't know exactly how long it's going to take, but how do you explain the fact that this planet is going to get to the point where there are too many lives for this planet to sustain?
I am convinced that the God who began history is going to bring history to a close when Jesus Christ returns a second time in power and great glory.
Exactly. So I present a fact that's eventually going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime, your lifetime, but it's eventually going to happen, and you respond with a personal belief.
But now I've got to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
What's motivating you? Why, if we're out here pursuing truth, I listen to you, what's motivating you to cut me off when I'm beginning to give the evidence that you've asked for?
You're giving evidence based on your belief. That's what it is. That's what I'm saying. This discussion can't go on any further. That's why.
Well, then why are you wasting your time standing here talking to me?
You know what? Because I'm looking for the truth. You're looking for the truth. Everybody else is looking for the truth. That's what everybody's standing here for.
Okay.
And unless
if what you say is true,
right,
then for you to tell me that when I say use your own mind, look at the order of the universe and ask yourself, is it more reasonable to believe that there's an intelligent mind behind it all, or is it more reasonable to believe that it's just chance? And you come back at me and say, that's just your belief. You have not listened to me, sir. You're not respecting me enough. I'm not saying believe because I believe.
Right.
I'm saying use your own mind, look at the order and design of the cosmos, and ask yourself, is it more reasonable to believe that this order and design comes by chance, or that it's a result of an accident? So in light of the fact that I said that so clearly, sir, why do you come back, I got to understand, and tell me I'm asking you to believe because I believe?
Okay, here's my point to that then.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you saying that I'm less intelligent because I look at the order of the cosmos and I say maybe it could be God, maybe things could have evolved the way they are right now? Are you saying that you're saying look into my mind and ask myself when I look at the order of the cosmos if there's a greater chance that a God created it or that something like this just evolved? So is it less intelligent to assume that this could be the product of evolution? Is it less intelligent of me to think that? So are you more intelligent because you look at the order of the cosmos and you say, oh, well, this is obviously God created this?
Totally different question, totally legitimate question.
Okay.
But I can promise you, all I said was, you guys take your own mind, you examine the evidence for yourself. That's what I was saying. Now, I believe, based on evidence, that IQ level and education level have almost nothing to do with this issue.
Okay.
Why? Because I work with mentally challenged people, and I stay in the home of Ivy League professors who teach biology at Cornell, Columbia, and they sit at the dinner table with me and tell me about their deep faith in Christ, and they're obviously leading scientists in the United States and the world, and they've got a deep faith in Christ. So the bottom line issue is not what's your IQ and what's your educational level. And I can promise you, sir, last Thursday and Friday was when I was at MIT. I am blown out of the water by the intelligence of those guys. And obviously the folks that invited me were followers of Christ who are at MIT, both faculty and students. So, sir, it's not an issue of intelligence. It's an issue of me challenging you because I love you, and I'm doing something stupid and quacky standing out here.
Oh, so why do you say this is quacky? It's not
because there's a stereotype that I have to smash, and it takes me a long time to smash the stereotype.
And if God is all-powerful and all-loving, why is there so much human suffering in the world? And by so much, I really mean, like, I study history and political science. It's like, it nearly brings me to tears when I read about just one event, and then I realize that this happens all the time through all of human history. Why does God allow this?
Okay, that's the hardest question for me. If God's all-powerful and if he's all-loving, then why is there so much suffering, evil, and death? I do not know. But as a Christian, I have to think. First point, no God, no problem. If there is no God, evil is totally relative. Good is totally relative. If there is no God, there is no such thing as, wow, this is really, really wrong. No, this just happens, friend. And that is the despair of atheism. There's nothing wrong with a baby dying. That's just life and death, if there is no God. But if there is a God who has given us life as a precious gift, and if that little baby has an innate value, then there is something wrong with death. And I'm glad you, my atheist friend, realize that there's something wrong with death. So, the person who is too upset about evil is contradicting himself. Now, the person who comes to me and says, well, you know, I can't believe that your God exists because, you know, these things happen. And if your God is really good and you define good that way and this stuff happens, well, you know, this God can't exist. But if a person's really worked up, it shows that they can't live out their relativism. And I'm glad they can't, because it's one of the clearest pieces of evidence that indeed God does exist. Okay, second point. In Genesis chapter 1 we read, God created this, and God saw that it was good. And God created that, and God saw that it was good. And we understand that when God created, he did a good job. He did not create evil. But in Genesis chapter 3 we read how human beings rebelled against God. And when human beings rebelled against God, God took a step back from planet Earth and chaos erupted. Now, what's one of the main points of the book of Job in the Old Testament? One of the main points of the book of Job in the Old Testament is life is unfair. God is fair. Don't get the two mixed up. And what's fascinating for me is to watch a person confronted by suffering, clench their fist, wave it in God's face, and get angry with God. And my point is, that is misplaced anger. You are born into a cursed, messed up world with a probability that malignant cancer can strike at any time, anywhere. With a probability that a free, autonomous human being could murder you or a loved one. With a probability that someone could get drunk, get in their car, cross the median, and slam into your sibling's car, sending him to an early grave. If you blame God, you're a con artist. It's not God's fault. It's the fact that we live in a cursed, messed up world, and there are a lot of irresponsible people, me being one of them at times. Third point. So far, it seems to me we've been rather theoretical. See, what I have to do is, as a minister, I have to sit beside the bed of dying people, and I have to do funerals. So my question is there life after death? Is there a solution for suffering and death? You can give me all your theoretical garbage you want and thinking. My question is, does God give a rip about suffering, dying people? That is the amazing message of Jesus Christ. The amazing message of Jesus Christ is God cares so much for you and for me that he sends his only son, Jesus Christ, to bleed and die on a cross in order to provide the ultimate solution for suffering and death. Forgiveness and eternal life in a heaven where there will be no more malignant cancer, no more drunk drivers crossing the median and slamming people into an early grave, no more HIV positive, but eternal life in the presence of God. Now, I can promise you, sir, that's one of the main things that motivates me to do something as crazy as stand out here and speak. Because I'm praying that a bunch of you guys, eventually, at some point in your life, are going to embrace God's solution to the very real problem of suffering and death. And that solution, guys, is Jesus Christ.
Human language and translation between what you're talking about and what the books even say.
It was written in Greek, and it's translated into English. And I did study the Greek.
But Jesus didn't speak. Yeah, it was translated into Greek. I mean,
the Greek was the common language of the world, the known world at that time. And Alexander the Great made sure that Greek was the common trade language.
My part of this dialogue is to bring in a little skepticism. I don't know. Anyway, I appreciate you talking.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
What do you mean by life comes from non-life?
You bet. An atheist is someone who says, obviously, we observe life. But an atheist is someone who says the life that we observe, ultimately, push it back, comes from non-life.
And by non-life, you mean
Matter, energy, non-life. Now, my observation is life only comes from life. Be it plant life, be it animal life, be it human life. You never once get life come from non-life. That is why it is much more reasonable for me to be a theist, believing that there's a living God who's eternal, than for me to believe that life comes from non-life.
So an atheist would say then that we're here because we've evolved from different chemical reactions to what the earth has, and animals have evolved and we're here. And we can write John Loves Mary in the sand because our mind is intelligent enough to let us do that. We can decide to do that, and an atheist will say that it has nothing to do with God giving us that power. It's just over time we've become more intelligent due to this evolution.
At this point in the history of science and research, there is no evidence that life comes out of non-life spontaneously by chance.
Okay.
Stanley Miller, right? University of Chicago, used to be taught in almost every high school biology class in the United States. Oh, wow. Dr. Stanley Miller showed us life comes from non-life. No, that experiment has been shown to be totally 100% false.
Okay, where is your proof then that life comes from God?
It's not a question from God, it's a question of life comes from life.
So
Therefore, I have to ask myself, is it more plausible to believe that there's an eternal living being that gives us life, or is it more plausible to believe that non-life gives us life?
So what your belief is based on is that it's more plausible that somebody created us.
That life comes from life.
Okay, but the thing is, an atheist doesn't believe that because an atheist doesn't have proof. Exactly. There's no one up in the sky saying, I created you.
That's right. And the atheist can't prove anything, and I can't prove anything. Nobody can prove anything. The question is, what does the evidence point to? What's most reasonable to conclude in light of the evidence? That's the issue.
I don't think that we can come to a conclusion with that issue because we don't have enough proof for either side. It's what you believe.
Prove to me that UConn's going to give you a diploma on your day of graduation.
I'll see that. 120 credits. They're giving me a diploma. I fit their
Prove to me that on your day of graduation they're not going to say, we're going to break tradition, no diplomas this year.
It's a legal contract. I signed up, I get a diploma.
Oh, and you think that all legal contracts are honored?
I'd like to see this university not honor it.
Well, I can't prove that they're going to. I can prove that they have. I don't
We
really
can't prove
understand.
anything.
Failed if it doesn't.
But that doesn't mean we just blindly believe. Rather, we use our minds to discover evidence and then to follow the evidence.
Okay.
All right?
All right. So it's basically whether or not you think you see the evidence and you think this is science or this is a higher power. I mean, I guess nobody's really wrong then. Because some people it's more plausible that God didn't create all this. Some people it is more plausible that God created all this.
Sir, it is not science versus God. It is a philosophy of science versus God. The philosophy of science that says there is no intelligent mind behind this creation is not science. It's a philosophy of science.
So what if they believe that we're just creations of like biology and the environment and we just kind of grow?
It's a worldview. It's a faith.
Okay.
What is, you see,
I'm convinced the faith is wrong, but they're convinced my faith is wrong.
Right.
So now obviously the question is going to be, in reality, is there a God or not? And if there's no God, when we all die, we all become fertilizer. We all go to nothingness. But if there is a God who has called us to live in relationship with us, there are going to be consequences. The 1992 Summer Olympics were held in Barcelona. Britain's Derek Redmond was running after his dream, a gold in the 400-meter race. He was rounding the final turn. He saw the finish line ahead, but suddenly a searing pain raced up the back of his right leg. He tore a hamstring. Sports Illustrated records what happened after that. He fell to his face on the track. The medical emergency crew began to come towards him. But suddenly a man ran down out of the stands, busted through the security guards, ran up to Derek. It was his father, Jim Redmond. Derek fought to get up on his feet and began to stagger towards the finish line. Jim said, "Son, you don't have to do this." Derek said, "Absolutely, I'm going to do this, Dad. I've trained to do this, to finish this race." Jim said, "All right, son, then we're going to do it together." And with their arms around each other, Jim and Derek Redmond hobbled across the finish line. Often Derek's head was buried in his father Jim's shoulder. The crowd began to applaud. Then the crowd stood up and applauded. Then the crowd applauded and howled their approval, with many people weeping. Derek Redmond did not leave the 1992 Barcelona Olympics with a gold medal, but he did leave with a memory of his father getting down out of the stands and coming to help him at his time of need. Jesus Christ revealed that God is not an apathetic deity. God is not an aloof deity. Instead, God created you and me and gave us the magnificent, incredible gift of life. Then when you and I rebelled against him, when you and I experienced the sting of rejection, loneliness, when you and I experienced failure, dejection, disappointment in life, instead of washing his hands of a mess, God came out of the stands. God entered human history in the person of Jesus Christ to rescue us, to help us. In other words, God is a personal God who really cares about you and cares about me. The bad news is we really have stumbled and fallen. Our moral stumbling, the Bible calls sin. It is choosing to rebel against God and to go our own way. It is choosing to break God's moral law. It is choosing to violate our consciences. We know we've done this, for we all experience guilt. One day, Jesus was at a Pharisee's home for dinner. A lot of rich religious people sitting around the table. Suddenly, a woman who had lived a sinful life came running in off the street. She ran up to Jesus, she collapsed at his feet, she began to weep, and she allowed her tears to fall on the feet of Christ. She took out some ointment, anointed his feet, took down her long hair, and began to wipe and dry his feet with her hair. All the religious people shrank back in horror. Jesus looked at the host, Simon, and said, "Simon, I got a little story to tell you. There once was a rich creditor who had two debtors. One debtor owed him 500 days' wages. The other debtor owed him 50 days' wages. The rich creditor canceled the debts of both of the two debtors. Which of the two debtors do you think loved the rich creditor more?" Without a moment's hesitation, Simon said, Obviously, the poor debtor who had the larger debt canceled. He loved the rich creditor more." And Jesus said, "That's right, Simon." And then looking at the woman, he said, "Simon, I came into your house and you had no water to wash my feet, as is the custom of the day. But this woman has not stopped washing my feet with her tears. Simon, I came into your house and you had no kiss of greeting, as is the custom of the day. But this woman has not stopped kissing my feet. Simon, he who has been forgiven much loves much, but he who's been forgiven little loves little." Do you realize that you've stumbled and fallen? Do you realize that that's a real bad fall? Sure you do. You know guilt. You know the sting of rejection. You know the keen pain of disappointment, of frustration, of discouragement, even maybe of despair. That is not the way God created you and me to enjoy life. This world is an unfair world. It's a messed up world. Jesus Christ promised to return one day and to redo this world. But he came down out of the stands to help you and me. He lived a sinless life, and then he bled and died on a cross to forgive our sin, to tie us into an eternal love relationship with the living God. Christ ascended to heaven, and he's coming back a second time. Believe it or not, he will return. He promised to. And when he returns, there will be a day of judgment. There will be a heaven and a hell. There will be a separation. I pray that you will put your faith in Jesus Christ, that you will receive from him the rescue, the salvation, the hope that Christ promises to all who put their faith and trust in him.
The truth is getting hard to find. I have objections to what I've learned. I have questions and concerns. Give me an answer. Where is justice?